The Death Star's armament is an intricate and finely tuned system designed to deliver overwhelming firepower across a variety of combat scenarios. The weapons are powered by the station's central hypermatter annihilation reactor, which provides the vast amount of energy required for both the superlaser and the multitude of turbo lasers, ion cannons, and other weapons. The power distribution system ensures that energy is allocated to the appropriate systems based on the tactical needs of the moment, but also requires careful management to prevent overloads, especially given the extreme power demands of the superlaser. The Death Star's superlaser is the most powerful weapon on the station, capable of destroying entire planets with a single shot. The power output of the hypermatter annihilation reactor is funneled into the superlaser system, where it is first passed through a primary power amplifier. From there, it feeds into the superlaser power cell, which stores and stabilizes the energy for firing. The firing field amplifier further concentrates the power, ensuring that the energy is properly distributed across the 8 tributary beam shafts. Each of these shafts is equipped with focusing coils that focus the energy into a single beam. The superlaser's efficiency is remarkable, as it can release massive amounts of energy in the form of a single destructive beam. However, the aiming and targeting of the superlaser are incredibly complex. The positioning of the Death Star and the alignment of its various systems must be absolutely precise for the superlaser to hit its intended target. The beam is aimed using a set of targeting systems integrated with the station's sensor array, which must track the target across vast distances. The targeting and firing calculations are highly complex, relying on both manual input and AI-assisted systems to ensure accuracy. The process of focusing and firing the superlaser involves multiple stages of energy manipulation, each requiring careful synchronization of various components. The rate of fire of the superlaser is slow due to the enormous amounts of energy required to charge the weapon, with a single shot taking several minutes to prepare and align before being fired. This makes the superlaser incredibly powerful but also impractical for rapid-fire combat. Additionally, cooling systems are required to manage the waste heat produced by the superlaser's components. These systems are critical for ensuring that the reactor and superlaser components do not overheat during operation, as excessive heat buildup could lead to reactor instability or damage to the crystals. The Death Star's turbo lasers, including the 12,000 XX9 heavy turbo laser batteries, are mounted on the station's exterior and are distributed across the surface for all-around coverage. These weapons operate by channeling energy through focused plasma streams that cause massive destruction upon impact. The turbo lasers are designed for long-range combat, allowing the Death Star to engage other capital ships or planetary targets from a great distance. Each of the turbo laser batteries is equipped with targeting sensors and aiming systems that allow for rapid firing adjustments. The aiming speed of the turbo lasers is quite fast, given their role in engaging fast-moving targets like enemy ships or starfighters. These turbo lasers are capable of firing rapidly in succession, though their rate of fire is still slower than smaller weapons like quad laser cannons or point defense systems. However, they offer much greater firepower and range. The cooling of the turbo lasers is a complex process, as the energy released during each shot generates intense heat. The batteries are equipped with heat dissipation systems that use coolant fluids to regulate temperature. These cooling systems must be highly efficient to maintain consistent performance, as overheating could impair firing accuracy or even damage the weapons. In addition to the turbo lasers, the Death Star features 10,000 light ion cannons. These are specialized weapons designed to disable enemy ships by draining their energy reserves, rather than causing outright destruction. The ion cannons are particularly useful for capturing enemy ships intact, allowing for subsequent boarding operations or repurposing of the captured vessels. The ion cannon system is integrated with the Death Star's fire control and sensor systems, ensuring that the ion blasts are precisely aimed at the target's energy systems. The rate of fire for the ion cannons is relatively high, given their lower power output compared to turbo lasers. However, their effect on targets is quite significant, as they can render enemy vessels useless by disabling their engines and shields. The Death Star's point defense systems, which include the 50,000 turret-mounted quad laser cannons and another 50,000 twin heavy laser cannons, are essential for protecting the station from smaller, faster threats such as starfighters or missiles. These weapons are mounted on turrets and are capable of rapid, sustained fire. Their efficiency is crucial in high-speed battles, where enemy starfighters can attempt to swarm or overwhelm the station's defenses. The aiming speed of these point defense lasers is extremely fast, with targeting systems that can lock onto fast-moving targets like TIE fighters or Rebel starfighters with high precision. The rate of fire is also incredibly fast, enabling the lasers to continuously barrage enemy ships with sustained energy blasts. Cooling for these systems is critical, as the repeated firing of these lasers generates a large amount of heat. The cooling systems for the point defense lasers are designed to rapidly dissipate the heat generated during sustained fire, preventing damage to the laser components. In addition to the energy-based weapons, the Death Star is equipped with 20,000 turret-mounted point defense concussion missile launchers. These are designed to intercept incoming missiles or provide additional firepower against enemy starfighters. The missile launchers are integrated with the station's fire control systems, allowing for the rapid targeting and interception of enemy projectiles. While the rate of fire for the missile launchers is slower than that of the laser cannons, their destructive potential is considerable as the missiles themselves are equipped with powerful warheads capable of dealing substantial damage to enemy craft. The Death Star also features 1,000 heavy tractor beam projectors. These devices are capable of capturing and holding enemy ships, preventing escape or enabling them to be drawn into the Death Star for destruction or capture. The tractor beams are an important auxiliary system that complements the station's offensive weaponry. They are highly effective at immobilizing enemy craft, allowing other weapons to finish them off. The Death Star's weapons are designed with modularity in mind, allowing for upgrades and modifications as technological advancements are made or as the tactical needs of the station evolve. The turbo laser batteries, ion cannons, and other weapons can be retrofitted with improved targeting systems, enhanced power cells, or more efficient cooling mechanisms to improve their effectiveness in combat. Additionally, the superlaser can be recalibrated to increase its firing rate, though this would come at the cost of greater stress on the reactor and more demanding cooling requirements. The gun systems on the Death Star represent some of the most advanced and destructive technology in the galaxy, providing the station with overwhelming firepower across all ranges of combat. From the planet-destroying superlaser to the rapid-firing point defense lasers, the Death Star's weaponry ensures that it is a nearly invulnerable presence in any battle. The technical complexity and power demands of the weapon systems make the Death Star a unique and terrifying threat to the galaxy, capable of reshaping the balance of power with a single shot. The Death Star was equipped with a staggering 123 sublight engines produced by Quat Drive Yards, one of the most renowned manufacturers in the galaxy for producing large-scale ships and space stations. These engines were crucial in providing the Death Star with the ability to maneuver, despite its immense size. Given the Death Star's mass, even with this large number of engines, its agility in space was extremely limited. But the engines were still capable of providing the necessary thrust to alter its position within a star system, or move towards its intended target. These engines were designed to operate in unison, distributing the immense power generated by the hypermatter annihilation reactor across the station to provide sufficient thrust for movement. The engines themselves, despite being state-of-the-art for their time, faced a constant balancing act between providing enough speed for the station's immense size and the amount of power required to maintain the Death Star's operational readiness. While sublight engines are typically designed to propel ships through the vacuum of space at a fraction of the speed of light, the Death Star's engines were specifically built for large-scale vessels that would rarely need to perform evasive maneuvers or quick bursts of acceleration. Instead, their primary role was to slowly and steadily move the station across space, allowing it to engage in planetary bombardment or position itself within a system to exert dominance. However, due to the station's enormous mass, these engines were not designed for quick acceleration or rapid changes in velocity. In battle, this lack of speed was mitigated by the station's sheer firepower, making it a stationary fortress in space. Despite this, the 123 engines were still vital in positioning the station to align its weapons, maintain orbital stability, or respond to enemy forces when necessary. Additionally, the fuel and maintenance needs for these engines were substantial. Due to the size and complexity of the Death Star, the engines required frequent upkeep to ensure their reliability and efficiency. Routine maintenance was required to ensure that the systems did not degrade over time, as any malfunction could have caused a significant loss of maneuverability, which could prove disastrous in combat situations. The engines, while critical to the station's movement, were just one of the many complex systems that contributed to the Death Star's formidable presence. Despite their sheer power, the sublight engines were ultimately limited by the station's size and mass, which meant the Death Star relied far more heavily on its superlaser and defense systems for its offensive capabilities. The Death Star was equipped with a Class 4 hyperdrive system as its primary means of faster-than-light travel, with a Class 20 hyperdrive system as a backup. The Class 4 hyperdrive was considered fairly advanced and provided the Death Star with the ability to travel across vast distances in a relatively short period of time, though its size and mass did pose limitations. In normal operational conditions, the Class 4 hyperdrive allowed the station to travel between star systems with a moderate level of speed. However, due to the Death Star's immense weight and design considerations, it was still significantly slower compared to smaller ships, making it less ideal for rapid response operations in space. The Class 20 hyperdrive system served as a backup in case the primary system encountered issues or required maintenance. The Class 20 rating is much slower than the Class 4, meaning that, in the event of a failure in the primary hyperdrive, the Death Star would experience a considerable delay in travel. The secondary system was critical for ensuring the station's operational continuity, particularly in emergencies, although it was not typically used for regular operations. Both of these hyperdrive systems were powered by the hypermatter annihilation reactor, which generated the necessary energy to propel the Death Star through hyperspace. The reactor's incredible power output allowed the Death Star to maintain a reliable hyperdrive function, even though the scale and complexity of the station's systems meant that long travel times were expected, especially when the backup system was in use. Ultimately, the hyperdrive systems of the Death Star were less focused on speed and more on ensuring that the station could maintain its mission parameters, which involved positioning itself within star systems and engaging planetary targets rather than responding to fast-moving threats in deep space. The Death Star's power output was nothing short of colossal, surpassing that of a star in terms of energy generation. At the core of this power generation was a massive hypermatter annihilation reactor, a highly advanced piece of technology capable of producing vast amounts of energy through the process of hypermatter annihilation. The reactor was housed in a cavernous chamber at the center of the station, shielded by radiation insulator plating to protect the surrounding systems and the station's structural integrity. Should the reactor be compromised, its destruction could lead to catastrophic consequences, potentially triggering an explosive release of energy that could decimate the Death Star itself. The reactor's core was stabilized and shielded with dunium and dolomite, two rare and durable materials known for their ability to withstand the immense radiation and heat produced by the hypermatter reaction. These materials were also critical in protecting sensitive components like the focus dish and the superlaser apparatus. The Death Star's superlaser, the weapon of unparalleled destructive power, relied on the reactor's energy to charge and fire. The reactor's immense power output was distributed to various components across the station, including the superlaser, power diversion solenoid, and multiple power cells that stored energy for different systems. The reactor's efficiency and stability were of paramount importance, as a miscalculation or mishap could cause a failure of the entire system. The reactor also powered auxiliary systems, such as the tractor beam generators, which were essential for capturing or immobilizing enemy vessels. 7 power generator terminals distributed throughout the station ensured that these systems received the necessary energy, guaranteeing that the Death Star could deploy its full complement of weapons and functions during combat. To control the immense energy output, the superlaser's power could be modulated by adjusting the number of reactor ignitions used to feed the weapon. A single ignition of the reactor could unleash enough energy to obliterate vast portions of a planet's surface. However, the full power of the superlaser, capable of annihilating an entire world, required multiple reactor ignitions, increasing the complexity and time required to prepare for such a cataclysmic shot. In essence, the hypermatter annihilation reactor was the beating heart of the Death Star, powering its weapons, shields, and systems. The entire station's operations hinged on its stability and efficiency, and any malfunction could spell the end for the Death Star. The reactor's sheer power and the systems it fueled made the Death Star a nearly indomitable force, but also introduced risks that required precise control to avoid disaster. The Death Star was a massive space station with a spheroid shape, measuring 160 kilometers, 100 miles, in diameter. The station was composed of 357 internal levels, covering a surface area of over 45,000 square kilometers, making it one of the largest and most complex structures in the galaxy. The station's size was further emphasized by the superlaser emitter dish located in the northern hemisphere, which was one of the most iconic features of the Death Star. This dish served as the focal point for the superweapon capable of destroying entire planets. Above this dish, in the northern polar command sector, was the Overbridge, the primary command center for the Death Star's operations. Within the Overbridge, the station housed the War Room, where high-ranking officers such as Grand Moff Tarkin could oversee operations. The War Room featured designated posts, a HoloNet booth for communication with the Emperor, and large banks of view screens for surveillance and strategic planning. The Death Star conference room, located on the officer's deck, contained a circular table with 12 seats for Imperial officers, which was where key meetings and decisions were made. The Emperor's personal tower and throne room were also situated within the command sector, highlighting the station's role as both a military and political symbol of Imperial power. The equator of the Death Star was lined with numerous docking ports, supported by tractor beam projectors and focusing shafts. These docking areas were crucial for receiving and deploying various ships, including Imperial-class star destroyers. The station's surface also contained turbo laser emplacements, mooring platforms, and emitter towers designed to defend the station against enemy attacks. The presence of tulip-style Imperial workstations throughout the station's various rooms ensured the smooth operation of the station, with each sector of the station equipped with the necessary infrastructure to function efficiently. A habitable crust several kilometers thick provided essential facilities for the crew, including command centers, armories, and maintenance blocks. Some of the lower levels of the station were designated for backup weapons operators and other emergency personnel in the event of a crisis. The station's southern hemisphere extended downward, where additional armories, deep storage, and a southern command sector were located. Massive girders provided structural support to the lower levels, and cranes and construction material remained within the station's confines, evidence of its ongoing construction and maintenance until its destruction. The interior space of the Death Star, with the exception of the habitable crust, was largely uninhabited and housed critical systems such as the hypermatter reactor, hyperdrive, and sublight engines, 123 in total produced by Kuat drive yards. The station's superweapon was also located within the central core, where it was powered and ready for deployment. The outer hull of the Death Star was constructed from quadanium steel plates, a durable material capable of withstanding substantial firepower. Within the station, modular artificial atmosphere stations and water recycling tanks were spread throughout the various levels to maintain a breathable environment for the crew. Large cavernous airways served as the means for air circulation and as emergency exits in the event of atmosphere contamination. A central airway ran through each sector, ensuring efficient air distribution. Magnetic seals and an atmosphere containment projector played a critical role in maintaining the station's internal atmosphere, preventing the vacuum of space from entering the station when docking bay doors were opened. The Death Star was, without question, an engineering marvel designed not only as a weapon of unparalleled destructive power, but also as a self-sustained, mobile base that could support Imperial forces for extended operations in deep space. The Death Star was equipped with advanced deflector shield generators that formed its primary line of defense. These shield generators were designed to protect the station from large-scale fleet attacks, making them highly effective against capital ships and other large threats. The deflector shields were not meant to engage individual starfighters directly, as the Empire considered them to be minimal threats in comparison to the vast firepower of the Death Star. Instead, the shields were engineered to absorb and dissipate the immense energy released by heavy turbo laser fire and other large-scale weaponry. The shield projectors were strategically distributed across the station's surface, ensuring that the Death Star was enveloped in a uniform protective barrier. These projectors worked in tandem with communications arrays to maintain operational integrity, allowing the station to maintain contact with fleet assets and support operations. A network of security stations was positioned around the station's circumference, each equipped with holographic maps to provide a comprehensive view of the surrounding space, ensuring that all potential threats could be monitored and responded to in real time. The Death Star's hull was constructed from quadanium steel, a material known for its immense durability and resistance to both kinetic and energy-based weapons. This steel provided a strong and reliable framework for the Death Star, capable of withstanding the stresses of hyperspace travel and the barrage of enemy fire that would be expected during any major combat engagement. The quadanium steel's properties were critical in ensuring the station's structural integrity, especially in combination with the shield generators, as the combination of both systems allowed the Death Star to sustain prolonged engagements without significant damage. Together, the deflector shields and quadanium steel hull formed an exceptionally robust defense for the station, capable of withstanding substantial damage during galactic-scale conflicts. However, it should be noted that while these defenses were formidable, they were not impervious as seen in the Death Star's eventual destruction. The sheer scale of the station, combined with its reliance on these defense mechanisms, meant that any vulnerability in the system, such as weaknesses in shield alignment or power routing, could lead to catastrophic consequences. The Death Star had an extensive and formidable complement of craft and personnel, designed to enable it to deploy a significant defensive force and maintain control over vast areas of space. The starfighter complement consisted of 7,000 starfighters, including the iconic TIE/LN Space Superiority Starfighters and TI Advanced X-1 models. The TIE/LN starfighters, known for their speed and maneuverability, were designed for dogfighting and close-range engagements, while the TIE Advanced X-1 was a more advanced model, offering greater durability and firepower, often used for specialized missions. These starfighters provided the Death Star with a significant level of defense and offensive capabilities, particularly in the event of a large-scale attack. In addition to the starfighters, the Death Star carried a staggering 3,600 shuttles, which were used for a variety of purposes, including transport, resupply missions, and troop deployment. The large number of shuttles ensured that the Death Star could maintain continuous operations and respond to shifting needs in terms of logistics and personnel movement. The station was also equipped with 2,800 AT-series walkers, providing heavy ground support for planetary invasions or defense operations. These walkers, designed for ground combat, offered a versatile and mobile platform for the Death Star's forces to project power onto planetary surfaces, dealing with ground forces or securing strategic locations. Finally, the Death Star carried 1,860 landing craft, critical for deploying troops and equipment onto planetary surfaces or conducting evacuations. These craft provided the necessary infrastructure to support large-scale planetary assaults, ensuring that the Empire could enforce its dominance over any world it encountered. This complement of starfighters, shuttles, walkers, and landing craft allowed the Death Star not only to engage in high-level space combat, but also to carry out complex military operations on planetary surfaces, making it an overwhelmingly powerful and self-sustained vessel capable of enforcing Imperial rule across the galaxy. The Death Star housed a vast crew, ranging between 1,186,295 and 1,206,293 personnel, depending on the specific mission and operational requirements. This massive crew ensured that the station could effectively maintain its operations across multiple domains, from combat and defense to logistics and command. The primary personnel aboard the Death Star were drawn from the Imperial Navy and Imperial Army, with approximately 342,953 officers, soldiers, and specialists responsible for overseeing various aspects of the station's operations, including its weapons systems, defenses, and logistical support. These personnel were the backbone of the Death Star's operations, ensuring the station could carry out its primary mission of serving as both a mobile command center and a symbol of the Empire's overwhelming power. In addition to the Navy and Army, the Death Star also housed a significant complement of stormtroopers, totaling 25,984. These elite soldiers were stationed aboard the Death Star to serve in various roles, including security, garrison duty, and boarding actions. Their primary function was to maintain order aboard the station and enforce the will of the Emperor, whether it involved neutralizing potential threats within the station or conducting raids on enemy vessels or planets. Beyond the personnel directly involved in military operations, the crew also included specialized engineers, maintenance staff, medical personnel, and various administrative support officers, all of whom contributed to the station's day-to-day function. The sheer scale of the crew aboard the Death Star highlighted the enormous complexity of the station, which required a highly coordinated effort to keep it running smoothly. The station was essentially a floating city and military base combined, with every aspect of its operations requiring personnel expertise, from the command center to the lower levels, where the bulk of the logistical and operational support took place. The massive crew made the Death Star a fully operational, self-sustained battleground in space, capable of executing large-scale combat missions and military maneuvers without needing to rely on external supply chains. The Death Star was not only a formidable war machine, but also an extensive mobile base capable of supporting an immense number of individuals and resources for long-term operations in space. It was designed to carry up to 750,000 passengers, which included not just military personnel, but also civilian workers, support staff, and other essential personnel required to maintain the station's operations. In terms of cargo capacity, the Death Star was capable of storing over 1 million kilotons of materials. This vast capacity enabled it to carry a wide range of supplies, from weapons and ammunition to essential materials for sustaining its operations, including food, medical supplies, and spare parts. The Death Star could easily resupply itself and maintain a prolonged presence in deep space without the need for constant resupply missions from outside sources. The Death Star's consumables were designed to support its vast crew and operations for a long period of time. With 4 standard years of consumables, the station was equipped to survive without resupply for extended missions, making it an enduring presence that could project Imperial power across multiple star systems. This self-sufficiency was key to its design, allowing the Empire to maintain control over distant regions of the galaxy and establish a level of power that could not be easily undermined by outside forces. Overall, the Death Star was a self-sustained behemoth capable of supporting not only large-scale military operations, but also a significant civilian and logistical presence, which ensured its ability to operate independently for extended periods of time. The concept of a colossal, planet-killing battle station had existed for millennia, particularly among the Sith, who often sought weapons of ultimate destruction to enforce their rule. Various iterations of such a weapon had been envisioned throughout history, but the specific project that would eventually become the DS-1 orbital battle station, more commonly known as the Death Star, originated on Geonosis. The Geonosians, renowned for their engineering prowess, developed initial plans for the superweapon, referring to it as the Ultimate Weapon Project. During the First Battle of Geonosis, as the Clone Wars erupted, the Geonosian leader Archduke Poggle the Lesser entrusted the plans to Count Dooku, also known as Darth Tyrannus, who was both the public leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, CIS, and a secret Sith Lord. Recognizing the weapon's potential, Dooku transported the plans to Coruscant and presented them to his Sith master Darth Sidious, who, under his public persona as Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine, wielded immense influence over the Galactic Republic. Sidious saw the potential for such a weapon to solidify his impending galactic rule, ensuring that it would become a key asset for his future galactic empire. During the war, the Republic nearly uncovered the existence of the Death Star project. Jedi General Ayla Secura, along with her astromech droid, QTKT, infiltrated a secret research facility located on an unmapped moon, coming dangerously close to uncovering the weapon's design. However, the dark assassin Asajj Ventress, a deadly Sith acolyte and servant of Count Dooku, intercepted Secura. Engaging the Jedi in a fierce lightsaber duel, Ventress successfully prevented the Republic from discovering the project's existence, ensuring that the Death Star's development remained a closely guarded secret. As the Clone Wars continued, the construction of the Death Star was set into motion, evolving from a mere concept into a terrifying reality that would eventually shape the fate of the galaxy. The development of the Death Star was an immense undertaking, requiring vast financial and material resources. A conglomerate of factions played a role in secretly funding and supplying the project, including the Trade Federation, the Moonalist banking clan, and the Techno Union, all major corporate and industrial powers aligned with the Confederacy of Independent Systems, CIS. Ironically, the project was also covertly financed by the Republic itself, manipulated by Darth Sidious to ensure that both sides of the war contributed to the construction of his ultimate weapon. During later interrogations by Republic intelligence, Archduke Poggle the Lesser, the leader of the Geonosians, claimed that the schematics for the Death Star had not originated with his people, but were merely presented to them by Count Dooku. According to Poggle, the Geonosians had only refined the existing plans rather than creating them from scratch. Additionally, he revealed that the Stalgasan Hive, the primary engineering force behind the station, had not yet begun designing its main weapon by the time the Battle of Geonosis forced them to abandon their work. The superweapon's core design was centered around a superlaser array, a devastating weapon capable of annihilating entire planets. This destructive technology relied on massive kyber crystals, powerful and rare force-attuned minerals that could amplify energy to catastrophic levels. The concept of a super laser-powered doomsday weapon was not entirely new. Its origins traced back to ancient Sith technology, developed long before the rise of the Galactic Empire. Sidious and his Imperial engineers would later refine this technology, bringing the Death Star's apocalyptic potential to full realization. By 21 BBY, the Republic Special Weapons Group had explored various superweapon concepts, including an automated battle moon asteroid and a torpedo siege platform. However, neither of these projects progressed beyond the design phase. Around the same time, following the Second Battle of Geonosis, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine formally presented the Death Star plans to the Republic Strategic Advisory Cell during a classified briefing. At the time, Republic officials were unaware of Palpatine's true identity as Darth Sidious, nor did they suspect that the plans had originally been given to him by Count Dooku at the start of the Clone Wars. Instead, intelligence operatives and military strategists assumed that the plans had somehow fallen into Republic hands during or shortly after the battle on Geonosis. Using the schematics as leverage, Palpatine fabricated a massive deception, claiming that the Separatists were constructing their own planet-destroying superweapon. This fear-mongering tactic successfully manipulated the Republic's leadership, allowing him to secure unrestricted funding and resources for the secret construction of the Death Star. While the Republic believed it was racing to build a countermeasure against a non-existent Separatist superweapon, the reality was that Palpatine was laying the foundation for the Galactic Empire's ultimate instrument of terror. The Strategic Advisory Cell served as the primary oversight body responsible for planning and coordinating the construction of the Death Star. It was composed of a highly selective and secretive group of individuals drawn from the Republic's political, military, and corporate elite. The meetings of this group were held at the summit of the Strategic Planning Amphitheater within the Republic Center for Military Operations on Coruscant, a location carefully chosen to ensure maximum security and confidentiality. The composition of the cell reflected the vast range of expertise needed for such an unprecedented engineering challenge. Attendees included senators from key industrial systems, as well as representatives from the Republic's largest shipbuilding conglomerates, including Corellian Engineering Corporation, CEC, Kuat Drive Yards, KDY, and Rendili Star Drive. Also present were top structural engineers, starship designers, theoretical and experimental physicists, and influential members of the War Production Board, who ensured that the Death Star project remained well-funded and supplied with the necessary materials. Among the most influential figures in the group were Dr. Gubacher and Professor Sahali, both of whom contributed vital scientific expertise to the superweapons design. Lieutenant Commander Orson Krennic, a rising figure within the Republic's military-industrial complex, played a key role in overseeing the project's logistics and resource allocation. Vice Chancellor Mas Ameda, one of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's closest advisors, ensured the project remained politically insulated from oversight while maintaining an iron grip on the flow of information. At the very top of the hierarchy was Palpatine himself, orchestrating every aspect of the plan with the ultimate goal of ensuring the Death Star became the symbol of the Galactic Empire's unchallenged dominance. Despite the Jedi Order's involvement in nearly every major Republic military initiative during the Clone Wars, the Jedi were deliberately excluded from the Strategic Advisory Cell. They remained completely unaware of the battle station's development, a key factor in Palpatine's grand strategy. By the time the Republic transitioned into the Empire, the Death Star's construction was already well underway, and not a single Jedi had ever laid eyes on its classified schematics. All individuals involved in the construction of the Death Star were required to sign the official secrets oath, binding them to complete secrecy under penalty of treason. The Republic, driven by fears that the Separatists were developing their own superweapon, allocated near unlimited funding to the project. This intelligence assessment suggested that Count Dooku's failure to assault the Geonosian shipyards during the First Battle of Geonosis was due to the Confederacy's own battle station being secretly developed elsewhere. Despite Poggle the Lesser's insistence that the Separatists had no such project, most members of the Strategic Advisory Cell refused to take his claims at face value. Instead, Republic intelligence agencies launched extensive covert operations across the galaxy, attempting to uncover evidence of an alleged Confederate superweapon. Although the intelligence remained largely speculative and inconclusive, dismissing the possibility outright would have jeopardized the enormous flow of credits being funneled into the Death Star project. This fear-driven justification for continued investment ensured that funding remained unquestioned, even as Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's Emergency Powers Act already granted him sweeping authority over military expenditures. As a result, the Death Star's construction was framed not just as a means of securing Republic dominance, but as a race to outmatch a presumed Separatist counterpart, further accelerating its development as a top strategic priority. Before the Clone Wars, the idea of funding a massive planet-killing superweapon would have been dismissed as unnecessary and impractical. However, as the war escalated, the Republic became increasingly desperate for a decisive advantage over the Separatists, making it easier to justify massive expenditures on classified military projects. A growing number of research firms and engineering corporations were gradually absorbed into government contracts, each working on seemingly independent aspects of the battle station, such as shielding, power generation, weapon systems, and propulsion, without realizing they were contributing to the creation of the Death Star itself. To maintain secrecy, all personnel involved in defense research projects were required to sign the official secrets oath, ensuring absolute confidentiality under severe penalties for treason. The initial stages of construction were carried out by newly developed automated machinery, designed specifically for large-scale orbital assembly. While many of these machines functioned autonomously, some required sentient operators who were housed in command habitats, positioned in close orbit around the station. The sheer scale of the project required an immense logistical operation, with entire fleets of ships ferrying raw materials, organic compounds, and water supplies to sustain the station's construction. A major source of construction materials came from viable asteroids, which were towed and tractor-beamed from Geonosis planetary rings and the surrounding asteroid fields in the Geonosis system. These asteroids were rich in heavy metals and rare minerals, essential for the production of durasteel and other high-strength alloys. Once extracted, Raw ores were transported to foundries positioned in synchronous orbit, where they were refined, processed, and forged into structural components for the battle station. Through this combination of strategic secrecy, advanced automation, and large-scale resource exploitation, the Death Star's construction progressed at an unprecedented scale, ensuring that the Republic, soon to become the Galactic Empire, would have an ultimate weapon to enforce its rule across the galaxy. The construction of the Death Star relied heavily on cannibalized droid factories originally built by Bactoid Armor Workshop on Geonosis' surface. These repurposed factories were modified to serve as additional foundries, significantly accelerating the production of essential metal components and structural supports once asteroid mining operations began. By 21 BBY, following the Second Battle of Geonosis and just before the first anniversary of the First Battle of Geonosis, the Strategic Advisory Cell officially announced the completion of Phase 1 of the Death Star's construction. At this point, the fundamental superstructure supports, spanning 160 kilometers from pole to pole, had been successfully erected, forming the skeletal foundation of the battle station. The next stage of construction focused on fabricating a temporary equator, accompanied by longitudinal bands designed to shape the station's spherical form. Once these bands were secured, full-scale hull construction began. This included the partitioning of interior sections, gradually transforming the superstructure into a functional battle station. As the cabins and internal spaces were established, they were clad, sealed, and pressurized, enabling the gradual integration of sentient laborers alongside automated droid workers. This shift allowed for more specialized craftsmanship, as living engineers and technicians could now oversee fine assembly work, system integration, and quality control, ensuring that the station's construction met Imperial standards. Initial estimates for sentient labor required to complete the Death Star numbered in the millions. A Strategic Advisory Cell subcommittee even considered commissioning the Kaminoans to grow a specialized clone labor force genetically adapted for deep space construction. However, Lieutenant Commander Orson Krennic took a more immediate and politically advantageous approach, independently negotiating a deal with Poggle the Lesser, the Archduke of Geonosis. In exchange for cooperating with the Republic, Poggle agreed to provide a Geonosian workforce to begin full-scale construction of the battle station. Krennic's unorthodox maneuver was not met with punishment, but rather with a promotion, as Maz Ameda granted him greater oversight of the project. Over the following months, Geonosian workers successfully completed the station's false equator, which at that stage resembled an antique gyroscope more than a cohesive sphere. This was a major milestone in construction, allowing engineers to move forward with reinforcing the upper hemisphere by installing latitudinal structural members. Simultaneously, rudimentary layout work had begun on cladding portions of the curved hull, ensuring the framework for the battle station's iconic spherical shape was beginning to take form. Construction droids, working tirelessly alongside their Geonosian counterparts, began shaping the first interior compartments. These early sections, though temporary placeholders, would later serve as the foundation for fully bulkheaded cabin spaces. As construction progressed, the Geonosians themselves were designated to be the first organic inhabitants of the station's life support modules, marking a pivotal transition from purely mechanized assembly to an increasingly hybrid labor force combining droid automation with sentient oversight. As the Death Star project progressed, the reliance on Geonosian laborers and automated droids continued to expand. With the false equator completed and latitudinal structural members reinforcing the station's growing frame, the construction process shifted towards internal compartmentalization and hull plating. Construction droids, following programmed schematics, meticulously assembled placeholder compartments, ensuring that the eventual bulkheading of permanent cabin spaces could proceed efficiently. The Geonosians, as the first organic workforce, were essential in handling complex manual tasks beyond the capability of droids. Their hive mind efficiency allowed them to quickly adapt to zero-gravity labor, making them indispensable for life support module construction. However, their involvement came with unexpected consequences. Over time, Imperial overseers grew concerned about the potential for security leaks and Geonosian resistance, prompting discussions about phasing out their labor in favor of a more controllable workforce. Despite steady progress, the colossal scale of the project meant that the completion of a fully operational battle station remained distant. Internal disputes between Imperial engineers, military strategists, and bureaucrats slowed decision-making, and the sheer logistics of gathering materials, energy sources, and skilled specialists proved daunting. While Krennic's political maneuvering had earned him greater authority, it also drew the scrutiny of rival Imperial officers, particularly Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, who saw the Death Star as an opportunity to solidify his own strategic dominance. As the station's framework gradually took shape, the Death Star began transitioning from a theoretical superweapon to a tangible manifestation of Imperial power, an awe-inspiring and terrifying construct that, once completed, would forever change the balance of the galaxy. In the aftermath of Poggle the Lesser's public revelation of the Death Star project, the scale of the operation expanded significantly. Tens of thousands of drones were swiftly reassigned to Orbital Foundry 7, the second largest facility orbiting Geonosis, and visible from the command habitat. The facility played a crucial role in the creation of the Death Star's massive focusing dish, a critical component of the station's superweapon capabilities. The drones, under the supervision of winged Geonosian soldiers, worked tirelessly to craft enormous pie-slice-shaped concavities that, once assembled, would form the station's primary power well and targeting array. At this stage of the project, 3 of the focusing dish segments had already been completed, while an additional 6 pieces were in varying stages of assembly. The drones, highly specialized and efficient, were vital in managing the production of these massive components, a task far too intricate and heavy for the standard labor force of manual workers. The drones were carefully overseen by Geonosian soldiers, who ensured that every piece met the required specifications. These soldiers, part of the caste system established by Poggle, were fiercely loyal to their leader and worked in close coordination with the Geonosian elites to ensure the smooth operation of the construction process. Poggle the Lesser, stationed in his lavish suite connected to the foundry by a network of tubular connectors, continued to oversee the project's progress. His role was pivotal, not only as the head of the Geonosian species, but also as a key ally in the project's ongoing development. The luxury of his suite reflected his position of power within the Geonosian hierarchy, a stark contrast to the laborious nature of the work happening just beyond his doors. The plan for the Death Star's focusing dish was an ambitious and complex one, calling for the assembly of the massive parabolic dish in the vacuum of space. The dish would be carefully maneuvered into position using a combination of tug vessels and tractor beams, ultimately slotting into a vast, specially designed well in the upper hemisphere of the station, known colloquially as the dimple. This well would serve as the housing for the dish, which was a crucial element of the Death Star's superlaser weapon system. The parabolic dish was engineered to be telescopic, designed to extend away from the hull of the battle station in order to optimize the targeting and power projection capabilities of the early composite beam proton superlaser that the Special Weapons Group had proposed. The design for the superlaser, however, was still in its early and incomplete stages by the time construction on the Death Star had commenced. Because of this, many involved in the project believed that form must come before function, meaning that the physical construction of the dish would be prioritized, even though its precise technical specifications and operational characteristics were not yet fully realized. Orson Krennic, the director of advanced weapons research and one of the key figures overseeing the project, was placed in charge of the construction, assembly, and installation of the focusing dish. Krennic's leadership was instrumental in managing the highly technical operation, coordinating the various teams of engineers, laborers, and droids responsible for the dish's construction. His meticulous oversight ensured that the dish would meet the station's specifications for power output, accuracy, and range, even if its final weapon capabilities were still being developed. Poggle the Lesser, the Geonosian Archduke, continued to exert a tight control over the labor force involved in the Death Star's construction, leveraging his production philosophy to push workers beyond their limits. His approach involved forcing drones, including those of lesser skill or caste, into roles they were not naturally suited for, with the goal of increasing overall output. However, this created a dysfunctional work environment, with drones becoming unhappy and discontented with their harsh conditions. Despite these challenges, the work proceeded, and the final pie-slice-shaped modules for the Death Star's focusing dish were completed. However, the dish itself was still not fully assembled, and the upper hemisphere of the station, along with other portions of the superstructure, were still undergoing finishing touches. Meanwhile, the pace of construction for cabin spaces near the station's poles slowed down considerably, with work taking longer than expected due to the strain on resources and labor. In a particularly grim turn, the Geonosian species began to suffer. Their unique physiological trait, where they required meaningful work to sustain their mental and physical health, led to mass casualties as they were left idle with no tasks to perform. This issue was exacerbated by Poggle's disregard for the workers' well-being, believing that it spurred competition and would motivate the remaining laborers to work even harder. However, this only led to a growing number of worker fatalities, which contributed to a sense of despondency among the workforce. As dissatisfaction grew, Poggle's leadership became increasingly authoritarian, with Imperial Marines being called in to deal with any workers who refused to follow orders. Those who resisted were swiftly exterminated, a brutal solution to maintain control over the labor force and ensure that the Death Star project continued on its ambitious and deadly path. The exploitation and harsh treatment of the workers contributed to the brutal atmosphere surrounding the construction of the Death Star, one that would go on to shape the legacy of the station as a symbol of both technological might and cruelty. By 19 BBY, the construction of the Death Star had reached a critical point, but tensions within the labor force had escalated dramatically. The Geonosian drones, pushed to their breaking point by the oppressive work conditions and the brutality of Poggle's management, engaged in a full-scale riot, destroying 3 months' worth of progress in the process. Despite attempts to improve living conditions and limit overcrowding, the drones' unrest had reached a tipping point, culminating in a chaotic outburst that set back the construction timeline. At this stage, the parabolic focusing dish of the station was nearing assembly, and significant progress had been made in other areas. The hull cladding was in place, and interior spaces had been bulkheaded and made habitable for the eventual occupants. However, the riot served as a distraction for a more nefarious purpose. The true motive behind the labor rebellion was revealed when it was discovered that Archduke Poggle the Lesser, the Geonosian overseer, had used the chaos as an opportunity to escape. Poggle had secretly arranged his escape from the station, using the riot as a smokescreen. His small craft, which had been fitted with a clandestine hyperdrive by his drones, allowed him to flee to the Separatists. This marked the end of his direct involvement with the construction project, as he returned to his former allies in the Separatist alliance, effectively abandoning the Empire's ambitious weapon. His escape highlighted the deceptive nature of the Death Star's creation, where loyalty and betrayal were interwoven in the pursuit of ultimate power. Kyber crystals, essential for powering the Death Star's superlaser, were scoured from across the galaxy during the final stages of the Clone Wars. The Separatist Alliance, under the covert direction of Darth Sidious, had made efforts to acquire these rare and powerful crystals to complete the station's weapon. However, one such attempt ended in failure on the Outer Rim world of Utapau. The Jedi, specifically Master Obi-Wan Kenobi and Knight Anakin Skywalker, intercepted the operation, preventing the Separatists from securing the Kyber crystals needed for the superlaser's development. By 19 BBY, the Clone Wars had come to an abrupt end. Darth Sidious, having orchestrated the war for his own purposes, eliminated his Separatist puppets, including his former apprentice, Count Dooku, and declared the birth of the Galactic Empire. Sidious, now Emperor, consolidated his power and ushered in an era of authoritarian rule across the galaxy. The defeat of the Separatists and the dissolution of the Republic marked the final phase in Sidious's grand design, culminating in the construction of the Death Star, a symbol of his totalitarian control and a harbinger of the Empire's dominance. After the rise of the Galactic Empire in 19 BBY, the Ultimate Weapon Project was immediately appropriated by Emperor Palpatine and classified under the highest levels of secrecy. Access to Geonosis, where the Death Star was being constructed, was restricted to a select inner circle of Imperial scientists and engineers, and very few members of the Imperial hierarchy even knew of the project's existence. to ensure the project's secrecy, the Empire established a highly secure supply line with numerous false routes and outposts, preventing any leaks or external interference. During this period, the battle station was officially named the Death Star, with the hull designation DS-1, although the early codename, Stardust, continued to appear in some design files. Tion Gergerod, an architect and starship designer from Tinel 4, was enlisted to contribute his expertise to the construction of the megaweapon, further solidifying the Empire's commitment to the project. As the Death Star's construction advanced, Emperor Palpatine transferred responsibility for the station to the Imperial Navy, assigning Wilhelm Tarkin and Orson Krennic to oversee the project. Tarkin, a ruthless military strategist and staunch advocate for the station's use, worked alongside Krennic to ensure that the Death Star would be completed as the ultimate weapon of the Empire, a tool capable of instilling fear across the galaxy and maintaining Imperial control. Despite the rapid progress in the construction of the Death Star, not all Imperial officials were convinced of its effectiveness. Some voiced serious concerns over the long-term viability of such a massive project, with one of the earliest criticisms coming from General Gelia Shale, who strongly protested its development. However, her objections were ultimately sidelined, and her input was marginalized as the years went by. Shale was one of many who feared that placing all of the Empire's resources into a single colossal weapon was dangerous and short-sighted. Grand Admiral Balanhai Savet expressed his skepticism, suggesting that the Death Star might remain functional for 5, 10, or even 50 years, but he believed that eventually someone would discover a way to disable or destroy it. He feared the idea of relying on a single asset rather than diversifying Imperial military might, and that the weapon could be vulnerable in the long run. Similarly, General Cassio Tag shared concerns over the over-reliance on the Death Star as the Empire's only instrument of terror. Tag believed that placing all of the Empire's military focus into one superweapon was a fatal mistake. He argued that the Empire would be left defenseless if the Death Star were ever destroyed or rendered ineffective. These dissenting voices were ultimately drowned out by the Imperial bureaucracy and the unwavering commitment of Wilhelm Tarkin and Orson Krennic to ensure the Death Star's completion, despite the growing concerns. The project continued to be a top priority for the Empire, with its leaders increasingly viewing the weapon as essential to maintaining control over the galaxy. The Tarkin Initiative, an Imperial think tank, was crucial in providing the intellectual foundation for both the first and second Death Stars. This group of thinkers, scientists, and military strategists helped shape many of the ideas and technologies that would eventually be implemented into the Death Star's design and construction. While various starship designers and engineers claimed credit for the station's creation, the full details and history of the moon-sized superweapon were known only to Emperor Palpatine himself. The true origins of the project remained shrouded in mystery, with only whispers of its past. Within the Imperial ranks, rumors circulated about the weapon's past, particularly a theory that the Death Star was originally a weapon engineered by the Geonosian Archduke Poggle the Lesser for Count Dooku and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. This theory suggested that the Death Star was an abandoned project of the Separatists that had somehow fallen into Republic hands by the end of the Clone Wars. The idea seemed plausible, especially considering that the station's shell and laser focusing dish were already in development by the time the Clone Wars had ended. Despite these rumors, no one within the Empire could definitively prove the story's accuracy, and it was left as just another piece of the mystery surrounding the Death Star's true origin. The fact that such rumors persisted, however, pointed to a deeper, more complicated history behind the Death Star, one that connected it to the old Separatist cause and was rooted in the dark and secretive corners of the galaxy's past. Despite the uncertainty over its exact origins, the Tarkin Initiative ensured that the Death Star would become an essential tool for Palpatine's vision of galactic domination. Shortly after the proclamation of the New Order, Emperor Palpatine and Lord Vader visited the Death Star, accompanied by Governor Tarkin, aboard a brand new Imperial-class Star Destroyer. By this time, the focusing dish had been successfully installed, marking a significant milestone in the Death Star's construction. However, Orson Krennic, the director of advanced weapons research, believed he had been excluded from the elite group visiting the station due to the recent escape of Poggle the Lesser, which had occurred under his supervision. This exclusion only deepened Krennic's ambition to control the Death Star project. Both Wilhuff Tarkin and Orson Krennic sought to gain full control over the Death Star project. Krennic particularly had been working behind the scenes for years to advance his position. During the Clone Wars, Krennic had manipulated his longtime friend, Galen Erso, a brilliant scientist, into working on a top-secret project, Project Celestial Power. This Imperial research division was unknowingly dedicated to weaponizing Galen Erso's Kyber crystal research, which would later become integral to the Death Star's superlaser. Krennic believed that by involving Galen in this research, he could eventually gain oversight of the Death Star project and secure a promotion to Rear Admiral. To further his own interests, Krennic also took aggressive actions to secure resources for the Imperial war machine. He began appropriating legacy worlds, planets that were legally exempt from exploitation under the Republic, by utilizing the independent contractor Hus Obit. Obit was tasked with delivering weapons and war materials to worlds like Samovar, Wadi Rafa, and others that were rich in valuable resources like Dunium and Dolomite. Krennic, under the guise of preventing separatist holdouts from accessing these resources, would later discover the weapons on these planets and appropriate them for his own use, further consolidating his power and influence within the Empire. Wilhuff Tarkin viewed Orson Krennic's actions, particularly the appropriation of planets without the Emperor's permission, as a blatant display of overreaching ambition, impulsiveness, and a complete disregard for authority and the chain of command. While both Tarkin and Krennic shared the goal of controlling the Death Star project, Tarkin believed he was the more suitable leader for it, seeing Krennic's behavior as a sign of weakness and instability. Tarkin, calculating and methodical, understood the Emperor's tendency to reward those who excelled, but also knew that Palpatine often had a knack for eliminating those who overstepped their bounds. Tarkin decided to take advantage of Krennic's flaws, planning to use him as a scapegoat for any issues or delays the Death Star project would inevitably encounter. By doing so, Tarkin hoped to position himself as the ideal candidate to take over the project once the Emperor had become disillusioned with Krennic. In an attempt to further weaken Krennic's position, Tarkin played a long game. Despite his disdain for Krennic's methods, he continued to defer to him in public, biding his time until the right moment presented itself to oust Krennic. Meanwhile, Krennic, aware of Tarkin's ambitions, worked to keep the latter distracted and occupied, to prevent him from gaining further influence. In 18 BBY, Krennic executed a clever strategy to undermine Tarkin. He orchestrated an insurgency within the Salient system, knowing that Tarkin, unable to retreat from the conflict, would be forced into a prolonged battle. This would damage Tarkin's standing with the Emperor, lowering his favor and making it more difficult for Tarkin to challenge Krennic's position. It was a calculated move in their ongoing power struggle, each man attempting to outmaneuver the other for control of the Death Star project and the future of the Empire. The Death Star's superlaser underwent several test firings, with early attempts leading to catastrophic results, including the complete destruction of an entire city on the planet Malpaz. However, the first successful test firing took place much later, at the isolated black hole binary system known as the Hero Twins. Preliminary scans indicated that the power released during this test firing was equivalent to the combined firepower of an entire Quaz-class Star Destroyer, a significant achievement for the superlaser's potential as a weapon of mass destruction. The superlaser worked through a Kyber crystal-assisted twin laser array, which had been painstakingly assembled and calibrated on Hippori. Once the array was ready, it was installed aboard an Imperial-class Star Destroyer, appropriated by the Special Weapons Group. While Grand Vizier Mas Amedda had pushed for the test firing to occur closer to the core, Orson Krennic urged caution. He was well aware that a misfire could result in the complete destruction of the test ship, so he chose the more remote Hero Twin system for the trial. The success of the test firing marked a pivotal moment in the project. Krennic's careful planning and his ability to avoid the catastrophic consequences of the test firing earned him a promotion to full commander. This success not only validated the superlaser's destructive capabilities, but also solidified Krennic's standing in the eyes of the Empire, propelling him further into the upper echelons of power within the Imperial military. For over a year, Galen Erso worked under Project Celestial Power, an Imperial initiative tasked with harnessing the power of Kyber crystals, looted from Jedi temples and salvaged lightsabers, to create a new form of energy. Galen was given near unlimited access to these crystals and was placed in charge of highly classified research projects with codenames like Pax Aurora, Mark Omega, and Stellar Sphere. Despite being unaware of the true purpose behind his work, Galen believed he was helping to rebuild worlds ravaged by the Clone Wars, envisioning his research as a means to provide cheap energy for civilian populations. However, as time passed, Galen grew increasingly suspicious about the lack of transparency surrounding his research's final applications. His concerns were confirmed when he discovered that Orson Krennic had been secretly weaponizing his discoveries to fuel the Death Star's superlaser. Betrayed and horrified, Galen realized that his work was being used for destruction rather than the peaceful purposes he had envisioned. Furious and desperate to protect his family from the growing threat, Galen, along with his wife Lyra Erso and their daughter Jyn Erso, escaped from the Celestial Power Facility on Coruscant with the help of the infamous rebel leader Saw Gerrera. The Erso family sought refuge on the remote planet Lamu, hoping they could hide from Krennic's ever-growing reach. As a result of the Erso family's escape, Krennic was demoted to lieutenant commander, a blow to his pride and ambitions, as he had been humiliated by his former friend's defection to pacifism. The escape further fueled Krennic's resentment and anger toward Galen Erso. Meanwhile, Wilhuff Tarkin was given control over the Sentinel base and the Death Star project, shifting the focus of the battle station's development into Tarkin's hands, further complicating the power struggle within the Empire. The construction of the first Death Star continued in secrecy for several years above Geonosis, with Admiral Wilhuff Tarkin overseeing the operation. The project was carried out with utmost confidentiality, involving the use of construction modules operated by Wookiee slave laborers and workers from various other species, who were forced into grueling labor to meet the Empire's demands. Notable manufacturing facilities, such as those on Riosa, were requisitioned by the Empire, pushing their labor forces to the breaking point to provide the necessary components for the battle station's construction. Most of the assembly work was done in microgravity, utilizing specialized machinery and tools designed for low-gravity environments. Omnidirectional boosters were deployed to create artificial gravity in a large cabin space near the station's surface, which would eventually become the Overbridge, the nerve center of the Death Star. The station itself was surrounded by a significant security presence, including 4 Star Destroyers and double that number in frigates, ensuring that the project remained protected while it orbited above Geonosis. As construction progressed, parts of the station were slowly coming together. The Northern Hemisphere focus lens frame for the superlaser was still in its early stages, a metallic crater 5 years after the Empire took control of the project. Though some hyperdrive components had been installed, the Death Star was still far from ready for hyperspace travel, and the project's completion seemed a distant goal. The station hovered in a fixed orbit, a massive and ever-growing symbol of the Empire's ambition, surrounded by an army of construction droids and guarded by Imperial warships. To protect the construction of the Death Star and further obscure the true destination of materials, the Empire constructed several outposts during the Clone Wars, such as Desolation Station and Rampart Station. Rampart Station, in particular, acted as a marshalling depot for supplies heading to Geonosis, and these stations were strategically placed to further complicate any attempt to trace the shipments. The project's oversight was entrusted to Vice Admiral Dodd Ransid, who managed the operations from Sentinel Base, a sprawling garrison initially deployed from a Victory-class Star Destroyer. However, following the Antar atrocity, Wilhuff Tarkin took command, replacing Ransid. Emperor Palpatine sought to shield Tarkin from the political fallout of the scandal surrounding the operation, marking the beginning of Tarkin's involvement in the Death Star project. Tarkin's tenure at Sentinel Base lasted 3 years, during which time the base's operations and the hundreds of supply and sentry outposts constructed to support the project were mired by bureaucratic inefficiency and complexity. Logistical challenges plagued the project from the start. Shipments from various research sites were frequently delayed, while the attempt to mine asteroids above Geonosis was deemed unfeasible. The constant failure to meet construction deadlines created frustration among the engineers and scientists overseeing the work. Additionally, raids against convoys transporting supplies to the station further complicated the project's progress. The Empire's policy designed to ensure secrecy meant that no base commander, whether Moff, Admiral, or General, had unrestricted access to all the information about shipments, scheduling, or construction progress. As a result, no single individual was in charge of the project, with only the Emperor himself truly knowing the full scope of the project, though his visits were infrequent. The massive scale and the sheer number of individuals involved in the project made it difficult to complete. The Imperial Security Bureau and the Naval Intelligence Agency were tasked with silencing rumors and quashing information leaks, but the project's complexity continued to pose challenges. Discontented former Republic personnel frequently abandoned the project, leading to a growing list of missing scientists and technicians, many of whom had high-level security clearances. Comnor compiled a most wanted list to track down these deserters and prevent further disruptions to the station's construction. The attack on Sentinel Base was one of the most significant breaches of Imperial security during the early years of the Empire. The operation was carried out by a highly organized cell of former Republic intelligence operatives under the leadership of Birch Teller, a former Republic officer who had turned against the Empire. The sophistication of the attack shocked Imperial High Command, as the operatives managed to infiltrate Sentinel Base's security and introduce a false real-time feed into the local HoloNet relay. This deception successfully diverted Sentinel's defenses to Rampart Station, falsely making it appear as if the outpost was under attack by a fleet of Providence, Recusant, and Munificent-class warships, supposedly remnants of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The proximity of the attack to Geonosis, where the Death Star was under construction, heightened concerns among the highest echelons of Imperial power. The fact that an insurgent group had the technological capability to manipulate the HoloNet and deceive an important Imperial military installation raised alarms about the Empire's security. In response, Emperor Palpatine held an emergency meeting at the Imperial Palace, attended by members of the Joint Chiefs, Darth Vader and Wilhuff Tarkin. Palpatine entrusted Tarkin and Vader with leading the manhunt for Teller and his operatives, emphasizing the importance of eliminating the threat before further damage could be done. The subsequent investigation took Tarkin and Vader to Mercana, a planet previously associated with the Separatist Shadow Feed operation, a propaganda network used by the CIS during the Clone Wars. What was initially a mission to track Separatist remnants quickly escalated when Teller's insurgents hijacked Tarkin's personal starship, the Carrion Spike. The loss of the ship, a state-of-the-art stealth corvette, was a severe embarrassment for Tarkin, as it meant that the insurgents had access to some of the most advanced Imperial stealth technology. The hijacking of the Carrion Spike marked a turning point in the conflict between the Empire and early insurgent groups. It demonstrated that despite the Empire's overwhelming military superiority, determined dissidents with Republic-era training and advanced technological expertise could still pose a considerable threat to Imperial dominance. After hijacking the Carrion Spike, Birch Teller and his insurgents wreaked havoc across multiple mid- and outer rim worlds, using the stolen ship's advanced stealth technology to launch devastating hit-and-run attacks. They took full advantage of the Carrion Spike's ability to bypass Imperial defenses undetected, striking Imperial supply depots, military installations, and logistical hubs. These attacks were broadcasted across the local HoloNet, serving as a propaganda tool to inspire resistance against the Empire. Though the Imperial Security Bureau, ISB, swiftly moved to shut down these transmissions. The Empire's response came in force when the insurgents attempted to intercept and destroy a high-priority supply convoy destined for the Death Star construction site. This proved to be their downfall, as a fleet of Imperial-class Star Destroyers, including the Executrix, Compliant, and Enforcer, arrived in time to intercept and neutralize the attackers. During the Imperial crackdown, the insurgents' secret benefactor was exposed. Vice Admiral Dodd Rantit, a high-ranking Imperial officer who had been manipulating events behind the scenes. Ronstedt had a grand scheme. He planned to betray the rebels at the last moment, specifically above Karita, a key Imperial military world. By staging a dramatic capture or elimination of the insurgents, he aimed to gain favor with Emperor Palpatine and secure a promotion within the Imperial High Command. However, Ranstedt's true intentions were discovered before he could execute his plan. The Imperial Security Bureau, ISB, arrested him and subjected both him and the remaining insurgents to torture and execution in secret. The incident was erased from official records, ensuring that Tarkin's authority remained undisputed, while reinforcing the Empire's brutal policy of eliminating even high-ranking officers suspected of treachery. To cover up the embarrassment of Vice Admiral Ranstedt's betrayal, the Imperial HoloNet spun the Carrion spike attacks as part of a covert Imperial operation, an elaborate trap designed to flush out and eliminate rebel cells. This propaganda effort ensured that, while many across the galaxy knew something significant was being constructed over Geonosis, very few understood its true nature. The Death Star project remained shrouded in secrecy, its true purpose hidden behind layers of Imperial deception. As a result of Tarkin's success in containing the situation, Emperor Palpatine decreed his promotion to the newly established title of Grand Moff. This elevation not only gave him unprecedented authority over the Outer Rim, but also granted him total oversight of the Death Star project. However, despite his increased power, Tarkin carefully distanced himself from full accountability for the battle station's delays and complications. He continued to maneuver Krennic into the role of scapegoat, ensuring that any setbacks in the project would be blamed on Krennic rather than himself. Around this time, Krennic began to be officially recognized as the Director of Advanced Weapons Research. Just 2 weeks after Tarkin's promotion, several of the Death Star's sublight engines were completed and successfully tested. Tarkin personally oversaw the test firing as the station surpassed the rotational speed of Geonosis, a key milestone in its construction. While this demonstrated significant progress, the battle station was still far from operational, and Tarkin, ever the strategist, remained cautious, waiting until the Death Star was fully completed and combat-ready before fully attaching his name to its success. For years, the Death Star's construction was plagued by skirmishes and disruptions, as various rebel cells sought to undermine the Empire's secret project. One of the most damaging incidents occurred 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, when a group of Lothal rebels successfully intercepted and destroyed an Imperial supply convoy transporting Kyber crystals, an essential component of the superlaser. This attack significantly hampered construction, forcing delays in the station's completion. Sometime after these disruptions, the Death Star was quietly relocated from its original construction site over Geonosis to a new, undisclosed location. To ensure total secrecy, the Empire took extreme measures, wiping out the entire Geonosian species to prevent any surviving witnesses from exposing the project. Despite the relocation, rebel efforts to uncover the Empire's secret project persisted. 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, a construction module once used for the station's assembly became the site of an Imperial ambush. ISB agent Callus lured the same rebel cell responsible for the Kyber crystal attack into a trap, as they attempted to investigate what the Empire had been building over Geonosis. However, despite the Empire's carefully laid plans, the rebels managed to escape, once again denying the Empire total security over its top-secret superweapon. During the Death Star's construction, Saw Gerrera and his partisans came dangerously close to uncovering the Empire's top-secret project. His relentless insurgency against Imperial forces forced the Empire to take drastic action, leading to the decision to relocate the battle station. Around 9 BBY, the Death Star was moved from Geonosis to Scarif for its final stages of construction. At Scarif, Director Orson Krennic personally oversaw the project's protection, ensuring maximum secrecy and security. To enforce his authority and safeguard the battle station, Krennic was accompanied by his elite detachment of Death Troopers, handpicked for their ruthlessness and efficiency in eliminating threats. This move marked the final phase of the Empire's ultimate weapon, bringing it one step closer to completion. Assistant Director Brierly Ronan, a devoted member of Project Stardust, firmly believed that once the Death Star was fully operational, the entire Imperial political structure on Coruscant would become obsolete. In his view, only Emperor Palpatine and Director Krennic would hold any real power, as the Death Star's terrifying presence would render traditional governance unnecessary. However, Lieutenant Eli Vanto, a former Imperial Navy officer who had since joined the Chiss Ascendancy, saw a different outcome. He speculated that Palpatine alone would emerge as the Empire's sole authority, consolidating power completely at the expense of figures like Krennic. Despite Vanto's warnings, Ronan refused to accept the possibility that his revered superior, Krennic, could be sidelined or eliminated once the station was complete. The destruction of Jedha City marked the first operational test of the Death Star's superlaser, albeit at minimal power. The Empire framed the blast as a mining accident, but the devastation was impossible to hide, and the event sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. While Krennic viewed the test as a success, Tarkin remained skeptical about the station's full capabilities. Krennic, eager to prove his project's worth, sought to eliminate any doubts about the Death Star's effectiveness. However, before he could consolidate his control over the station, Tarkin seized command, citing Krennic's failures in preventing information leaks, namely the escape of Jyn Erso and the discovery of the station's fatal design flaw. This flaw, intentionally built into the reactor core by Galen Erso, would later prove to be the Death Star's ultimate weakness. A small thermal exhaust port that, if targeted correctly, could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction, leading to the battle station's destruction. With the Death Star plans stolen by the Rogue One team, the Rebel Alliance gained a crucial opportunity to analyze the station's design. However, the Empire was already in pursuit. Princess Leia attempted to deliver the plans, but Darth Vader's forces intercepted her ship, the Tantive IV, over Tatooine. Despite her capture, she managed to hide the plans in R2-D2, who, along with C-3PO, escaped to the planet's surface. Meanwhile, Tarkin sought to test the obedience of the Death Star's gunner crews by ordering a simulated weapons test against the primitive planet Rangotan. This test was meant to assess the willingness of the station's personnel to follow orders without hesitation, as well as to reaffirm Imperial confidence in its destructive capabilities. However, the true demonstration of the Death Star's power would soon follow: the destruction of Alderaan. The destruction of Alderaan sent shockwaves across the galaxy, cementing the Death Star's reputation as the ultimate instrument of Imperial authority. However, the act also had unintended consequences. Rather than intimidating the galaxy into submission, it ignited widespread fear and rebellion, solidifying opposition against the Empire. Meanwhile, Leia Organa remained a prisoner aboard the station, unaware that a small team had infiltrated the Death Star to rescue her. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca, with the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi, managed to locate her within the detention block and orchestrated a daring escape. As they fought their way back to the Millennium Falcon, Kenobi confronted Darth Vader in a final duel, sacrificing himself to allow the others to flee. Although the rebels escaped with Leia, the Empire had already allowed them to leave, confident that a tracking device planted on the Falcon would lead them straight to the rebel base. Tarkin, certain of his imminent victory, prepared the Death Star to launch its ultimate attack, setting course for Yavin 4. As the Death Star loomed closer to Yavin 4, the Rebel Alliance scrambled to analyze the stolen schematics obtained by Jyn Erso and her team on Scarif. Galen Erso's hidden flaw, a vulnerable exhaust port leading to the station's main reactor, was identified as the key to destroying the battle station. With time running out, the rebels launched a desperate attack, deploying squadrons of starfighters to exploit the weakness. Tarkin, confident in the station's invincibility, dismissed the threat posed by the rebel starfighters. He refused to evacuate, believing that the station's overwhelming firepower and defenses would annihilate the rebel base before the attack could succeed. However, as the battle unfolded, the rebel pilots, led by Red and Gold squadrons, fought their way through the station's defenses. Darth Vader personally took to his TIE Advanced X-1, leading a squadron to eliminate the rebel pilots. His efforts nearly secured victory, but at the last moment, Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon intervened, clearing the way for Luke Skywalker. Guided by the Force, Luke launched his proton torpedoes directly into the exhaust port. Tarkin realized the impending doom mere seconds before the torpedoes reached the main reactor. As the explosion rapidly spread throughout the battle station, he remained on the command bridge, refusing to flee. In an instant, the Death Star was consumed in a massive detonation, taking Tarkin and thousands of Imperial personnel with it. The loss of the Death Star was a catastrophic blow to the Empire, marking the first major victory for the Rebel Alliance in their ongoing struggle against Imperial rule. The station, unable to withstand the destructive force of the explosion, erupted in a brilliant, massive explosion. The Rebel pilots, including Luke, narrowly escaped the shockwave, and the Death Star was reduced to nothing but debris in space. The Rebels had won, but the battle had cost them many ships and the war was far from over. The destruction of the Death Star marked a pivotal victory for the Rebel Alliance, striking a decisive blow to the Empire and proving that even the mightiest of weapons could be defeated. However, the shadow of the Empire remained, and the Rebels knew that they would need to continue fighting to ensure the galaxy's freedom. In the wake of the Death Star's destruction, the Empire found itself in a state of shock and disarray. What had once been an immense, constantly active communications hub fell eerily silent. The bustling transmissions and commands that had once emanated from the Death Star ceased in an instant, sending ripples of confusion and uncertainty throughout Imperial command. In the hours following the catastrophic loss, rumors of the Death Star's destruction spread quickly. Some believed it to be a hoax, others feared it was true, but the truth remained elusive. The galaxy's various factions and systems, whether Imperial or otherwise, reacted with a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and growing tension. To investigate the matter and confirm the worst fears of the Empire, the Imperial fleet dispatched a Gozanti-class cruiser under the command of Sienna Rhee and Barisa Sai. Their mission was clear: confirm the status of the Death Star and retrieve the most important Imperial officer still in the region, Lord Darth Vader. Trapped in his TIE Advanced X-1 after the explosion, Vader was presumed alive, but his fate remained uncertain amidst the chaos of the battle and subsequent destruction. Rhee and Sai made their way to the Yavin system, their cruiser racing against time to locate the wreckage and ensure that the Emperor's plans could still be salvaged. The loss of the Death Star was a devastating blow to the Empire, but with Lord Vader still in the picture, the Empire's leadership could begin the difficult task of maintaining control. As they approached the Yavin system, the fate of Darth Vader, arguably the Empire's greatest asset, was still unclear. While rumors swirled that the Death Star had been destroyed by a small group of rebels, including a mysterious pilot named Luke Skywalker, there was little concrete information. The Empire needed answers, and fast, or risk losing their grip on the galaxy altogether. The hunt for Vader would mark the beginning of a new chapter in the Empire's pursuit of power and control. After the rebels' fleeting celebration of their victory, the mood quickly shifted to one of urgency and caution. The destruction of the Death Star was a monumental blow to the Empire, but the rebels knew that the Empire would soon retaliate with overwhelming force. The news of the station's destruction spread across the galaxy, but the Rebel Alliance understood that the Empire's wrath would soon descend upon them. To avoid an inevitable Imperial reprisal, the rebels began evacuating their base on Yavin 4. They quickly dismantled operations, securing critical equipment and making arrangements for the safe departure of key personnel. The Alliance's leadership, including figures like Mon Mothma and General Dodonna, worked tirelessly to ensure that the core of the rebellion remained intact despite the loss of their key strategic position. The evacuation was tense and swift. Rebel pilots, technicians, and soldiers all moved with precision and determination, knowing that their lives and the future of the rebellion depended on a successful retreat. The base was quickly abandoned, with some of the rebels already moving to new secret locations, while others prepared to strike back at the Empire when the time was right. As the rebels scattered to the four corners of the galaxy, the Empire, still reeling from the loss of the Death Star, was sure to come hunting. The Battle of Yavin, while a victory for the Alliance, was only the beginning of a much larger war for the fate of the galaxy. The fight would continue, with both sides now focused on regrouping and preparing for the battles to come. In the wake of the Death Star's destruction, the Empire quickly shifted into overdrive, aiming to recover from the blow and reassert its dominance. The loss of Grand Moff Tarkin and many key figures within the Joint Chiefs, along with significant military personnel, was a devastating blow to Imperial leadership. But the Empire, while reeling, was determined to rebuild and respond with overwhelming force. The Emperor, unwilling to appear weak, ordered the mobilization of the Empire's vast resources, preparing for a full-scale galactic war. Imperial forces began to consolidate their strength, increasing production of warships, starfighters, and weapons. The DS-2 Death Star II Mobile Battle Station was conceived as a direct response to the destruction of the first Death Star, with even greater firepower and security measures to prevent a repeat of the Rebels' success. Construction on this new station began in secret, and it was designed to be mobile, making it harder for the Rebels to pinpoint or destroy it. The Empire believed that once completed, it would be a decisive force capable of crushing any remaining resistance in the galaxy. Meanwhile, the Imperial HoloNet worked to spin the narrative of the Death Star's destruction, downplaying the devastating loss and focusing instead on the Empire's strength and resolve. Propaganda broadcasts emphasized the power of the Empire, highlighting its ability to destroy entire planets as a show of force meant to intimidate any world that might dare to resist. The message was clear. The Emperor's reach was unchallenged, and any world that defied the Empire would face the same fate as Alderaan. As part of this campaign, Lord Vader, who had been absent from the destruction of Alderaan's remains, used pieces of the shattered planet as grim state gifts to worlds that were suspected of seditious thoughts. These fragments, a cruel reminder of the Empire's destructive power, were sent to these planets as a warning. Any dissent would be met with the full fury of the Emperor's might. It was a tactic designed not only to maintain order, but to sow fear, ensuring that no world would dare challenge Imperial rule. Despite the destruction of the Death Star, the Empire's resolve only seemed to harden, and the galaxy braced for the consequences of this new phase in the ongoing galactic war. The Rebel Alliance, though emboldened by their victory, now faced an empire that was more dangerous than ever. In the aftermath of the Death Star's destruction, the Empire struggled to regain its footing, especially as the loss of such a prestigious and powerful weapon began to affect Imperial morale. Despite the Imperial HoloNet's efforts to minimize the significance of the Rebel victory, statistical data revealed a predictable spike in pirate activity and dissidence across the galaxy. The defeat sparked a surge of resistance movements, emboldened by the success of the Rebel Alliance, as many saw the Empire's invulnerability as a myth shattered. The Emperor, enraged by the destruction of the Death Star and the inefficiency that led to its downfall, began to purge the highest ranks of the Imperial hierarchy. Executions of prominent officials like Moff Kuvern and Minister Kemp followed, the Emperor holding them responsible for the loss of the station and the perceived failure in protecting such an invaluable asset. This purge was a clear signal that the Emperor would not tolerate failure at the highest levels, and any officer deemed complicit in the loss would be punished ruthlessly. In response to the loss, the Emperor appointed General Cassio Tog to the newly created rank of Grand General. Tog, a pragmatic officer with a long-standing skepticism about the Death Star, was seen as a more reliable figure to guide the Empire through this difficult period. Unlike Tarkin, who had placed all his bets on the Death Star's ability to win the war, Tag believed that placing such focus on a single weapon was a strategic error. He argued that the Empire needed a more flexible and multifaceted approach, using its resources as force multipliers rather than relying solely on one asset, no matter how powerful. With this new strategy in mind, Taji began to redirect Imperial efforts, balancing the power of the fleet and the Navy while working on the completion of the second Death Star. The Emperor placed his trust in Taga's vision, betting that with a broader strategy and a reinforced Imperial Navy, the Empire would be able to neutralize the growing Rebel threat. Taga's ability to question the invulnerability of the Death Star and recognize the limitations of such a weapon marked a new era of Imperial military thinking, at least until the second Death Star could be completed and serve as a true symbol of the Empire's absolute might. In 5 ABY, the New Republic collected debris from the destroyed Death Star and, as a gesture of goodwill, gave it to the Alderaan flotilla. This was a gift from Princess Leia Organa, who had long fought for the preservation of her people's legacy after the destruction of Alderaan. Initially, the plan was to scrap the debris, but Leia used her political influence and connections within the New Republic to ensure that it was repurposed for a more meaningful cause. Rather than letting the remains of the Empire's weapon of mass destruction be discarded, Leia envisioned creating something that would symbolize the resilience of Alderaan's people. The debris was used to construct a new space station above the ruins of Alderaan, serving not only as a monument to those who perished in the Empire's attack, but also as a symbol of hope and rebirth. This new station became an important site for the Alderaan flotilla, and a reminder that even in the face of devastation, the will to rebuild and move forward would always prevail. The true cause behind the destruction of the Death Star, the flaw planted by Galen Erso, remained a closely guarded secret within the Empire and was never made widely known to the public. While some conspiracy theories circulated, with a few speculating that the Emperor had been betrayed by someone within his own ranks, the official story presented to the galaxy was that the Death Star was destroyed by a single well-placed shot fired by Luke Skywalker, a rebel pilot. This narrative became the accepted version of events, with the Emperor and the Empire keen on maintaining the illusion that the station's destruction was simply due to a lucky shot rather than a critical flaw in its design. This version of the story helped to preserve the Empire's image of invincibility and control, furthering the propaganda machine that sought to convince the galaxy that the Emperor's power could not be undone by mere rebels or their luck. As a result, the true nature of the Death Star's destruction remained a mystery to most, with only a select few ever knowing the full extent of the Empire's internal betrayal. Decades after the fall of the Empire, the First Order, the Empire's militaristic successor, sought to create a weapon even more formidable than the Death Star. This new weapon, Starkiller Base, was built into the kyber-rich planet of Ilum, utilizing the planet's vast kyber crystal reserves to power its superweapon. Starkiller Base was a significant technological advancement over the original Death Star designs, capable of firing its planet-destroying beam through sub-hyperspace, allowing it to target and annihilate multiple systems across vast distances, effectively bringing destruction on an unprecedented scale. However, just like its predecessors, Starkiller Base ultimately met its end through a critical flaw. A rebel strike force led by the Resistance discovered the weapon's weakness. Its primary weapon system was vulnerable to a direct hit through an aperture, similar to the thermal exhaust port on the Death Star. This critical flaw allowed the Resistance to destroy Starkiller Base, marking the end of yet another attempt by the Imperial legacy to wield planetary destroying power. The destruction of Starkiller Base was a significant blow to the First Order, just as the destruction of the Death Star had been to the Empire, proving once again that even the most powerful weapons of the galaxy could be brought down by the right strike at the right moment. In 34 ABY, while exiled on the remote planet Ahaj-To, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker experienced a vivid and haunting vision of an alternate reality. In this dream, Luke saw a life where he never received Princess Leia Organa's distress message, and consequently never joined the Rebel Alliance. In this alternate timeline, Luke did not participate in the Battle of Yavin, and the Death Star remained operational, continuing to serve as the Empire's terrifying weapon of destruction. In this dream, the Death Star's power was unleashed on several worlds. Alderaan's destruction was followed by the obliteration of Mon Cala, the homeworld of the Mon Calamari, and Chandrila, the homeworld of Leia Organa herself. These tragedies, instead of being averted by Luke's actions, were seen as the Empire's unchallenged victory in a galaxy-wide campaign of terror. In this vision, the Death Star remained a symbol of Imperial might, with its continued use as a tool of oppression and devastation, marking the course of galactic history. The dream served as a stark reminder to Luke of the weight of his choices and the ripple effect they had on the galaxy. Had he not answered the call to arms, the galaxy might have fallen into an even deeper darkness, with countless innocent lives lost. This vision underscored Luke's growing sense of responsibility and the importance of his pivotal role in the rebellion's success. It also reinforced his resolve to train the next generation of Jedi, as he recognized the significant impact one person's actions could have on the fate of the galaxy.